Oh, welcome in once again to the Waiver Wire show here on a Monday morning at 4 for 4 Fantasy Football. I am still, to this day, Matt Okada. I am alive in real life and also in mini fantasy playoffs. And we are live on YouTube and Twitter for this week's top 5 waiver ads and Q&A for anyone who's here live in the chats. Week 15 nearly in the books. We have a double header tonight on Monday Night Football with the Bears, Vikings, and the Falcons, Raiders. Good amount of fantasy relevant players, particularly for me in a league where I need Bijan Robinson and Darnell Mooney to pop off. Please pop off, guys. Otherwise, this felt like a weird week. I don't know. It's just a lot of lopsided games, I guess. A lot of players maybe didn't expect to pop off. Looking at you, Devontae Adams, popping off. Good amount of duds. A complete 0 from Cooper Kupp on Thursday Night Football really put a lot of fantasy managers behind. But then the Bills and Lions did their job and fixed a lot of that with a 48-42 Bills win. And now we finish it up with Chicago, Minnesota, and Atlanta, Las Vegas. But a lot of waiver relevance came out of this week as well. In fact, one of the more interesting weeks probably on the waiver wire in recent memory. So let's start it off at the top with numero uno, Jerome Ford. Yes, unfortunately, if you know anything about fantasy football or the Cleveland Browns, you know that Jerome Ford's name only becomes relevant when Nick Chubb gets hurt. And indeed, Nick Chubb broke his foot yesterday, ending his season, potentially ending his time in Cleveland. Given his history of injury, it almost will have to beg the question, does it end his career? But I don't expect that. He's only 28, I believe, should be back. But obviously, really unfortunate for him to return from the terrible knee injury last year, only get a couple games in, and then break his foot. But the flip side of that coin is that Jerome Ford now becomes the pretty much, I would expect, bell cow starter. Very intriguing fantasy edition as a result. He saw double digits touches in back-to-back games heading into Sunday. And then on Sunday, when Chubb exited, he actually only had 9 touches. Some of that probably came from the fact they were playing the Chiefs defense, which has been notoriously tough against running backs, and also from the fact that the Cleveland was trailing the entire game. But Jerome Ford had 104 scrimmage yards and a rushing touchdown on those 9 touches against the toughest run defense in football. So that's pretty encouraging. He had several decent games as the starter last year when Chubb was out with that knee injury very early on in the year. So that's encouraging. And he has decent matchups the remaining 2 games of the fantasy season against the Bengals and Dolphins. Both of those, I believe, he could take advantage of to the tune of 15 to 20 fantasy points without much trouble. Also, the Browns, and it's kind of tough to determine whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but the Browns are currently having a bit of an identity crisis at quarterback because Jameis Winston has thrown so many interceptions in recent weeks that he's tanked their chances of winning, despite how great he feels from a fantasy perspective sometimes, not this past week, or how fun he is as a personality and a football player. But they benched him late into Sunday's game and brought in Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and they have not named a starter for next week. Honestly, to me, I feel like it's unlikely that Dorian Thompson-Robinson gets a start over Jameis Winston, but in fairness, Jameis has just not been winning games. They face the Bengals, so no matter who it is, they should have a pretty big day. In fact, if you were to read the waiver wire column, you might see their names in there. Meanwhile, though, the point being, with the Browns not really knowing what's going on at quarterback, if they go with Jameis probably wanting to keep the ball relatively out of his hands a little more so he doesn't throw as many picks. And if they go to DTR, definitely wanting to keep the ball out of his hands and or lean on the run game because that's more of his cup of tea. Then Jerome Ford becomes very, very interesting. I think he has a good chance to be a mid-range RB2 rest of the season, but I think he also has like a floor of high-end RB3 and the upside to being RB1. So that is very rare this time of year. If you have a good amount of fab left or the top waiver priority, I would be okay dropping it all. In the column, I suggested, I believe, 15% minimum up to basically the max of what you have remaining. But average, you can go around 11% or so, 10 to 12%, if there aren't a lot of heavy waiver, heavy fab budget teams still competing in the playoffs. Really, this time of year, I'll just be honest. In fact, it's useful to start this up front. This time of year, the suggested fab bids really don't matter that much because so much of it depends on how much you have left, how much your other managers in your league have left, who of those managers is still in playoffs, whether those who are not in playoffs will still make moves or even allowed to make moves, what you need rest of season, because throughout the year we try to hold upside and things like that, but at this point we're kind of just looking for starts in week 16 and 17. So all that being said, Jerome Ford is number one. You can drop a whole lot of fab on him if you want. If you have the number one waiver priority, I would drop it on him. He has a very good chance to be a stud starter rest of the season in your fantasy lineup. Let's go to number two. Number two is another running back and one who has been in the column a couple weeks now. It is Sincere McCormick. Now, obviously, they play tonight. The Raiders play tonight against the Falcons on the second of the, well, they basically happen at the same time, but technically the second of the Monday Night Football doubleheader. It's not a great matchup. It's not guaranteed that Sincere McCormick pops off in this game. I don't really particularly care what he does in this game as long as he doesn't get hurt and as long as the Raiders continue to essentially lean on him as the lead back. I would say they don't even need to feature him in this game for me to feel great, but I'd like for them to, obviously. And every sign that they've given over the past week or two has suggested that they will and that they see him as their lead running back now and rest of season. So that takes Sincere McCormick to a very, very viable running back 2, running back 3 type of play in a vacuum, which means a pretty similar price point in fab to Jerome Ford. That all being said, the Raiders rest of season, the last 2 games, get the Jaguars and the Saints. Those are about as good matchups as you can get. They are in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, ranked 30th and 32nd right now. So you will not find a running back with a better matchup rest of season or a better pair of matchups rest of season than Sincere McCormick, legitimately. That is as good as it gets. And he is a volume play in a not great offense. But those type of players specifically get a relatively massive boost against bad defenses because the Jaguar or the Raiders are more likely to be competitive against the Jaguars and the Saints than almost any other team, which means that run game will stay more involved. The bad defenses mean that the team will move the ball more, which means more carries and touches for McCormick and also more red zone opportunities, most likely. It's all around a great situation for a high volume back on what typically would not be a great team or offense or situation. So I'd say McCormick is just behind Ford in a very similar tier. If he has a great game tonight, there's really no reason why he shouldn't jump Ford in priority, to be honest. I have him at, about 10% fab budget recommended, which is just below where I have Ford, unless you just want to blow everything on Ford. And that's with McCormick not having played today. If he comes out and has a great game today, I think he could jump up a little bit. So that is number two. Two great running back options to start off the show and the waiver wire this week. If you're in need of the position, you should probably consider throwing everything you've got left at one of these two guys. Number three, let's say you're not in need of the running back position, and in fact, you need a wide receiver. Jalen McMillan is my top guy. Maybe, possibly, hopefully, for the Bucks, they have found a fill-in for the wide receiver 2 role that Chris Godwin previously held before injury. With Mike Evans back and Jalen McMillan stepping up, it gives Baker Mayfield a much better shot at maintaining and upholding that great offense he had early in the season and helping carry this team into the playoffs with the defense that's not that good. Last two games, Jalen McMillan has 9 catches on 13 targets for 134 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns, which is really nice. Third round rookie, he topped 16.5 PPR fantasy points in both of those last 2 games and has a pretty good chance to do it again next week against the Cowboys in a primetime game. Cowboys are not scary on defense. Cade Otton has sort of faded in recent weeks, not entirely sure why. But with that being the case, McMillan has kind of stepped up as the number 2 for Baker and what is a very explosive offense who put up, I believe it was 40 points against the Chargers, who are the number 1 scoring defense entering the week. That is correct. The Bucs just put up 40 points against the best scoring defense in the NFL. So Jalen McMillan was a big part of that and figures to be so down the stretch as well. Now, I have him at a 8 to 10% fab bid. I will admit that this is aggressive and optimistic for McMillan, both on the fab budget and on the likelihood of, or the viability of starting him over the last 2 weeks, because it's a very small sample size for him. It's not impossible that some other Bucs receiver steps up instead. Cade Otton returns, Rachaad White has big games, what have you, because we don't really have a great foundation on which to trust Jalen McMillan. That being said, from what we've seen these last couple of weeks, I think that it would be wise for the Buccaneers to continue featuring Jalen McMillan. And they've typically made good decisions on offense this year. So I am going to optimistically, yes, but also with some confidence, add Jalen McMillan as a top receiver this week. Probably play him in some flex spots, depending on how deep your league is, depending on the depth of your roster, obviously. You're not starting him over a guy like Cooper Kupp, who just put up a goose egg, but you might be starting him over a guy like, I don't know, Zay Flowers, who hasn't been that good lately, I think. So that's number 3, Jalen McMillan. Let's go to number 4. Brenton Strange, tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Much like with Jerome Ford above, you can imagine that if Brenton Strange is in this column this high, it probably means Evan Ingram is hurt, and he is indeed out for the season. So Brenton Strange, earlier on in the year, Evan Ingram missed a few games. Brenton Strange got involved. He was kind of decent a couple different times and was sort of streamable for a very small window there. Evan Ingram out again. This past Sunday was his first missed game of what will be the rest of the season. And Brenton Strange had 11 catches on 12 targets for 73 receiving yards against the Jets. He barely trailed Brian Thomas Jr. for the lead in targets. He had 14. And he beat out Brian Thomas Jr. for the lead in catches. BTJ had 10. So apparently Mac Jones really likes Brenton Strange. Mac Jones obviously in at quarterback with Trevor Lawrence out for the year. So with that duo, assuming that this wasn't just a fluke game, which admittedly it could be, but the way that Mac Jones was looking at Brenton Strange this game and the way that Strange took those opportunities and ran with them, literally, I am going to feel some confidence in streaming Brenton Strange as a tight end one rest of season. They get the Raiders and Titans the last 2 games, both of which are very good matchups. So if you have somehow gotten to the playoffs without a tight end, or if you were relying on someone like Kyle Pitts or Evan Ingram, obviously, I think you can pick up and play Brenton Strange with some confidence. Another guy that I'm willing to drop roughly 10% of fab bid, but again, as I mentioned earlier, it's really just you throw out what you got. If you need a tight end, if you don't need a running back or a wide receiver, and you do need a tight end, then you can skip over all the guys I've mentioned previously and throw everything you've got on Brenton Strange. He is the top guy at the position. So add him. And let's finish it off with number 5, Kendre Miller. If you have been listening to the podcast with John on Fridays the last couple of weeks, you know that I have touched on Kendre Miller. And John was loath to believe me because or to get on board with me, because there has been a lot of Kendre Miller hype from the fantasy Twitter streets over the past couple of years, and he has vastly disappointed them by remaining injured the entire time and by earning the utter loathing, unadulterated loathing. Wow. Wicked reference, anybody? From head coach Dennis Allen for the Saints. But Dennis Allen is now gone. Darren Rizzi is in and likes Kendre Miller, and Kendre Miller is healthy. And potentially Alvin Kamara is not. And this was why I had mentioned Kendre Miller multiple times over the last couple of weeks, because Alvin Kamara tends to eventually get hurt almost every year of his career. Suffered a groin injury on Sunday. We do not know a timeline yet. At least I did not, to open up this morning. I can pull up the news real quick. Nothing new. Wait, I see a Darren Rizzi injury update on Alvin Kamara. He felt something on his long touchdown catch. That's what it sounds like from our medical staff. I'll have more information. He's going to get some imaging stuff. More on that later. Okay, so the update is we'll have some updates for you. Group G. Thanks a lot, Darren. That being said, this is a lost season for the Saints pretty much at this point. They're 5-9. I don't know why they would want to run Kamara into the ground with a groin injury rather than looking at Kendre Miller and seeing what they have in the young star. Well, young guy, yet to be determined if he's a star. I am of the assumption that we will not know anything more about Kamara by Tuesday night, but it's possible that we will have an update. I mean, I think we'll have an update. I just think it might be he's day-to-day and questionable for Sunday, and so we won't really know whether Kendre Miller will have a start opportunity. But I would add him with the expectation that we might, because if we do, it's pretty exciting for a guy that has looked pretty good with his touches. 10 carries for 32 yards in his first week back from injury with Darren Rizzi in week 14, and then 9 carries for 46 yards on Sunday when Kamara exited, or with Kamara exiting. If he gets a starting workload, I am very interested in putting him into a starting lineup in fantasy. So you want to have him stashed away if you can. This is not one of the 10%er type guys, probably, unless we get news before Tuesday night that Kamara is going to miss 1 or 2 weeks, in which case Kendre Miller kind of hops up into a very similar tier as Ford and McCormick. It's worth noting that even if Kamara there is news that he will probably play this week, Kendre Miller would be one of the best handcuffs because he has shown upside. There are not really any other scary running backs who would take touches here. We know he can handle touches, and Kamara's already injured in some capacity. So add Kendre Miller if you can. A lot of interesting names. That's probably one of the highest number 5 priority fab budget recommendations I've given all year. Some of that might have to do with this being end of season, but I think it just really is a pretty deep week. If you can't get any of these guys for some reason, or need somebody else, like perhaps a quarterback, go to 4for4.com/plans. Use promo code YouTube to get 25% off of a subscription to 4for4. and that will get you access to my waiver wire column. 3,000, sometimes to 4,000, though this time of year it's more like 3,000 words of goodness on every position with priorities at every position down the line. There are another dozen plus names beyond the ones I have hit on here. You want access to that if you are still in the fantasy playoffs. It is worth it to get it now because you could have had a guy like Kendre Miller already, or Sincere McCormick, who has been in the waiver wire column for a couple weeks. Get in there. All right, let's get into the Q&A. We've got a decent number of questions already, so I like seeing that. Keep them flowing, YouTube or Twitter, and we will get to whatever we can. Let's start it off with Michael Quinzel, friend, probably best friend of the show. Not a question, but says, "Hi, Matt, best waiver wire show all year." Boom. See, this is why you all need to subscribe to 4for4, because the column is just as good as the show. Jermaine Robinson. In one league, I was the undisputed number 1 seed and lost to the number 8 seed for some odd reason in this 12-man league. Top 8 make playoffs and no buys. I had a combo of Tyreek and Cup. Sideways, what is that? Smirk face and then crying face. Okay, so no question, just terrible. Yeah, this sucks. Such is life. Revin JJ. Just wanted to admit that I left BTJ on my bench. Hey, so did I. Played him almost every other week. Played London instead. Down 16. Have Darnold and London versus Bijan in his 16-point lead in PPR. Any hope? For the record, Revin, I played Cooper Kupp over Brian Thomas Jr. in a league. And it looks like I'm still going to advance by the grace of the fantasy gods. But I lost out on 28 points or something like that with that decision. So you are down 16, have Darnold and London versus Bijan in the 16-point lead. That is very close. I would say that Darnold should cancel out the 16-point lead, so you're basically getting London versus Bijan. And in PPR, that's not terrible. Obviously, your hope is that Darnold pops off for more than that. And or that London cancels out the 16-point lead and you have Darnold versus Bijan, which is maybe even better. I would guess that you have like a 45% chance to win in app and something around that in real life. So there's hope, yes. Jermaine Robinson notes, ooh, Demont out indefinitely, MCL. I had not seen this, so let's double check. Yeah. Could miss rest of season. Wow. That sucks major, major butt for the Lions, for David Montgomery, and for anyone in fantasy who is relying on him to win their fantasy championships and semifinals. That sucks. Whatever teams have Jahmyr Gibbs are going to win their remaining 2 matchups because he's going to have an unbelievable workload down the stretch. Let's see. Just for the heck of it, let's check the depth chart for who might come next. Craig Reynolds, Sione Vaki. Yeah. No. You're not picking anybody up. You're just hoping you have Jahmyr Gibbs. Good gracious, great balls of fire. Okay. That is tough. Revin JJ, you are the best, man. I always appreciate help on the artist formerly known as Twitter. Big shouts, Revin, for sure. Thanks for being here and for the questions. Michael Quinzel with a super chat. Bam, 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 bam. Pick up Foreman or Strong for deep roster spot. Thank you. I mean, listen, you can. Let's see what their depth chart looks like. Strong is number 3. Foreman is number 4, technically, according to their depth chart. You can. I would pick up Strong and then Foreman in that order in very deep leagues as a handcuff to Jerome Ford, basically, in case something happens in week 16. It's basically a 1 week does Jerome get hurt? Then I play this guy in week 17 kind of thing. And in fairness, I wouldn't feel that confident about playing Pierre Strong or Deontay Foreman if Jerome Ford got hurt. So this is like really desperate. You'd have to be in like a 14-team dynasty league that you've squeaked into the playoffs without any running backs for this to be interesting, I would say. Revin JJ, I have Ford as my one and only waiver. He's likely to get around 20 in PPR is my guess. Decent chance at that, Revin. A Loco says, can I ask a question about a trade offer I got? You absolutely can do that, A Loco. And I see that you did a couple chats down, so I'll just hop to that. I got a trade offer in Dynasty, Quentin Johnston and Zach Charbonnet, plus a second-round pick for Bryce Young. Okay, so I'm assuming this is Superflex. Let me see if you clarified. You did not, but I'm going to assume this is Superflex because that's the only place where Bryce Young would have this kind of value. This is somewhat difficult. Even when a quarterback is not that great, if they are a high draft pick, they have draft capital that makes them keeps them on their NFL team longer than maybe they should based off performance. I tend to stick around with that player. Bryce Young is also, I think, starting to get it together a little bit, and I believe in him as a prospect. So I think there's still a chance he becomes a regular QB2 for Superflex Dynasty leagues. And Quinn Johnston, who's I don't think very good and very unreliable, plus Zach Charbonnet, who is a admittedly very good handcuff, but a handcuff nonetheless, and a second-round pick for Bryce Young. To me, I think I pass on this because I believe in Bryce. But, well, okay, I'm not actually sure which side you're on. But if you're on the Bryce side and you believe in him, I think I would hold Bryce. If you are on the opposite side and you believe in Bryce, I would go for it, obviously. If you don't really think that Bryce Young is going to be a good NFL quarterback, I don't hate this return. But again, if Kenneth Walker comes back healthy and Zach Charbonnet is nothing but a handcuff rest of his near-term career, this ends up probably being a pretty bad trade, assuming Bryce Young is a playable QB2, which I think he should be. So it's close. And I think you have to have optimism in Bryce Young to make this trade, but I would do it. Daniel Quintanilla says, hey, Matt, thanks for all the advice. Need help. I have Otten. Should I drop him for Jake Ferguson, Hunter Henry, Brenton Strange, Will Disley, Noah Gray, or Juwan Johnson? So Cade Otten has been struggling of late, unfortunately. Jake Ferguson just had 2 catches for 23 yards against one of the best matchups in the league. So I don't feel great about him. Hunter Henry also had a bad game. 4 catches for 25 yards. Really not great. So Brenton Strange, I actually like the best of probably this whole group. Will Disley injured. Noah Gray, never going to trust him. And Juwan Johnson, fine. Did not have a good game on Sunday either. So with Brenton Strange having the best game and theoretically the best role, or one of at least the best roles, I am going to go with Brenton Strange here. Now the question is, do you drop Cade Otton for him? That becomes a little more difficult. Let me look at Cade Otton's targets real quick. I know he hasn't produced, but yeah, these last 4 games, 3-7 in an overtime game, 4-3, 3-7, 4-3 in targets. That was after a stretch where he had 6, 10, 10, 11, 8. So it really does suck, whatever has happened. Did Mike Evans return that week in 11/24? Let's see. I thought it was more recently than that. Nope, it was. Okay, fair enough. So Mike Evans returned, Cade Otton disappeared. I don't expect that to probably change. So I think you can move on from Cade Otton and play Brenton Strange down the stretch. Wild that that's the world we live in, but I am here for it. Michael Quinzel with another super chat. Add Patrick or Coker and drop De'Ami Brown. Thank you. I'm going to assume this is Tim Patrick, although it is not noted. Tim Patrick, I believe he scored again. 4 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. Did get 8 targets. I still don't trust Tim Patrick. These last 2 games, the Lions have thrown a gazillion times and scored a gazillion points. Admittedly, they often score a gazillion points, but particularly gazillion, and thrown it a ton. Jared Goff threw it 59 times in this game. I don't think Tim Patrick is trustable as a starter. Now, admittedly, I don't think Jalen Coker is trustable as a starter either. However, he made my waiver column and Tim Patrick did not, because I think Coker could have a reliable role as the number 2, whereas Tim Patrick is like Amon-Ra, Gibbs, Jameson Williams, sometimes Laporta, probably the 4A or 5th option in this offense. And that's, the run game is also significantly up there as an option. Though with David Montgomery out, that could put a wrinkle there. Excuse me. If it is Tim Patrick, I would go Jalen Coker here. I think you can absolutely drop De'Ami Brown. This must be dynasty for you to even have De'Ami Brown. I would go with Jalen Coker here and hope that you see enough from him next week to make him maybe startable in the championship if necessary. Both super chat questions are rest of season, Michael clarifies. Yeah, that's fine. Answers don't change there. UWS, I'm going to try to pronounce that, says start Adam Thielen or Jameson Williams next week. Colts, defense, or Bengals. Okay, let's look at the Week 16 matchups. So the Jameson Williams gets the Bears. That's not great, both from a defense standpoint and the Lions will probably be whooping the Bears' butts and not need to throw as much standpoint. Adam Thielen and the Panthers get the Cardinals. I like that much better. So I'll go Thielen here over Jameson Williams, and then Colts defense or Bengals. Colts get the Titans, best matchup in fantasy. The Bengals get the Browns, very good one as well. Both these teams are in the waiver column, incidentally. If Dorian Thompson-Robinson starts, that throws an extra wrinkle into it, although I'm not even sure what kind of wrinkle, because when it's Jameis, it's like you're going to get picks, but you also might get scored on. I think I will go the Colts here because the Titans have been so reliably bad, and the Browns are prone to have a good game suddenly every now and then. Yeah, it's close. Just for fun, though, let's look at Week 17. The Bengals get the Broncos, not good. The Colts get the Giants. So that's another reason to pick up the Colts because you can play them again in Week 17 with great confidence. They're, in fact, probably have the best remaining schedule of any defense. Yeah, so I go Indy there. Revin JJ says, it'll be interesting to see what defense is recommended as the Bills have been -4 and 1 points over the last 2 weeks. Yeah, well, they've played great offenses, and they're playing the Patriots next week, so I think you can play the Bills next week. I would not be scared. However, I do have several defenses in the column. It's probably the biggest defense week, and some of that comes from the fact that we're streaming for 1 or 2 weeks at this point. So a lot of more teams become viable, but also just a lot of unrostered teams have great matchups this week. So go check out the column. If you are not a subscriber, become one and pick from those teams if you want. Though I will say the Bills are in the same conversation as pretty much all those defenses because they have a good matchup against the Patriots. Sam Berg says, is Jalen McMillan worth adding over Judy, McConkey, D-Hop, or Devontae Smith? No. Absolutely not. Judy, McConkey, Devontae Smith are all great. And D-Hop is also very good. McMillan is could be very good. He could be what DeAndre Hopkins is, but it's a could, and D-Hop already is that. And the other 3 guys are all much better than McMillan, so I would not drop any of these guys. Additional note from Sam Burks, at last ad of the year, I've been holding on to like crazy as a just in case. Yeah, I think I've remembered your comments from recent pods. and the stupidity of the league that gives you limited ads. I would not use my last ad of the year on Jalen McMillan with those receivers. Not a chance. Joanne Sterling says, should I drop Kraft for Strange? Tucker Kraft, this would be. He had not been as good. He had 2 catches for 34 yards last night against the Seahawks. That's also not good. Feel like the receivers are getting more involved. Romeo Doubs is healthy. So, yes, I think I would make this move. It's another crazy one. K. Dotton and Tucker Kraft were like suddenly top 4 tight ends for a stretch earlier this year, and now we're dropping both of them for Brenton Strange. But that's the way fantasy works sometimes. So, yeah, I think I would do this. Michael Quinzel, again, is it okay to hold an extra kicker in a PPR 7 bench spot that only starts 1 QB, 2 receiver, 2 RB, 1 flex defense kicker? Yes, it is, but I am curious who and why. Like, typically the only reason I would do this is if you have your main kicker on bye or injured and set to return in week 17 or something. I am not interested in streaming really enough to probably typically want to have 2 kickers. Like maybe if one of your kickers was very good and had the best matchup in the league and your other kicker was just a little better but had the worst matchup and so you wanted to play the worst kicker this week, okay, maybe. But for the most part, with buys over, I don't think I would do this. But you also can. The alternative is holding onto a handcuff that has a 5% chance of becoming something. So you can. I just don't really know why you would. Ayinde Mitchell, I want to thank you because I picked up Miller off of your suggestion last week. Boom! That is why you subscribe to 4 for 4 and read the waiver wire column, or listen to the podcast with John on Friday. Ricardo Martinez, my opponent. Well, we have a lot of questions in chat today. Thank you, everybody. My opponent has 114.74 with Vikings DST and Hawkinson playing tonight, and I have 127.84 with DJ Moore also playing tonight. What do you think my chances of winning are? So you have a 13.1 point lead with DJ Moore against the Vikings DST and Hawkinson. You have a very good chance of winning. I would say that Hawkinson is likely to knock out your 13.1 point lead, roughly. But then you have DJ Moore against the Vikings against the Vikings defense. In more ways than one. DJ Moore in your lineup against the Bears defense in their lineup, but also DJ Moore plays against the Vikings defense, and they have been very, very kind to wide receivers this season. I think DJ Moore has a great chance at a great game. I would expect you win this one. It's like for the record, it's like 60% chance to win. It's not at all lock, but I would lean to your side. Michael Quinzel, what's my chance to win? Down 8.98, have Keenan Allen, Jacoby Myers, and Vikings D versus Bowers and Daniel Carlson. Side note, he had Devontae Adams. Okay. You are down 9 with Keenan Allen, Jacoby Myers, and Vikings D versus Bowers and Carlson. Okay, well, I will say that Carlson wipes out the lead. Oh, no. You're down 9. Okay, oof. Okay, we'll say the Vikings D wipes out that lead. This is how I like to play these kinds of things. The Vikings D roughly wipes out that lead. So you have Keenan Allen and Jacoby Myers versus Brock Bowers and Daniel Carlson. I will take your side there, but it's like 55-45. So I believe you'll win, but not a lock by any means. Okay, a gazillion back and forths between a couple people in the chat. Matt, is Ty Johnson an ad for RB2/flex rest of season? He is in the waiver wire column, Mac. Not particularly highly prioritized, and the fab bid is nowhere near as high as some of the guys we touched on today. But he is in there, and I do think is addable. Not necessarily as an RB2, probably as a flex in PPR only. And I will note that the Bills have thrown a ton and played in very competitive games the last 2 weeks. So Ty Johnson has had some value crop up. That was against the Rams and Lions in games they allowed 40-plus points in both. They faced the Patriots and Jets in the remaining 2 games of the fantasy season. So I don't think these game scripts are going to look anything like they have the last couple of weeks, which means I don't think Ty Johnson will probably be as good. That being said, I still don't mind adding him because A, if they just decide that they want to roll with him as like a top target on the team and we see that next week, it gives you a little more confidence to play him in week 17. And B, if James Cook gets hurt, I think we would see a heavy mixture between Ray Davis and Ty Johnson in week 17. And that would also make him potentially startable. So yes, I like adding him, just he's not a guaranteed starter by any means. Cody Watts says, if Brees is shut down, would you go with Isaiah Davis or Jerome Ford? Are there rumblings about Brees Hall getting shut down? Or are we just saying because he has not played really well and has been banged up? Yeah, it's that. Let's see what he did. I didn't actually see much of what he did. 9 carries for 30 yards and a touchdown, 2 catches for 21 yards. Man, what a disappointment he's been this year. If he gets shut down, I would take Jerome Ford over Isaiah Davis because Braylon Allen exists, and we saw the 50-50 split that Isaiah Davis saw. I don't think Jerome Ford would see that 50-50 split. He would probably lose some touches to Strong and Foreman, but not 50-50. I also just don't really know if Brees Hall is going to get shut down. I think it's probably unlikely. So I would go with Jerome Ford for sure. Sam Burks, Steelers/Lions defense this upcoming week if TJ Watt is out. Any news on TJ Watt and his health? I have not seen any news on TJ Watt. And it looks like there hasn't been any updates. Probably not long term. Should be available for the playoffs, but he might miss a week or two is the impression I'm getting. So Steelers sans TJ Watt, let's say this week, or the Detroit Lions. Steelers get the Ravens. Oh my gosh. No, you're not playing them. And the Lions get the Bears. Yes, you're playing them. You are playing the Lions or streaming one of the many defenses in the column this week. There are a lot of defenses that I would probably take over the Lions who are super banged up next week that are in the column. So check that out if you can, which you can by subscribing. Cody Watts, if Mahomes is out and Kelsey is a little banged up, can I justify starting Strange over him? Yes, you can. I think there's a very good chance Patrick Mahomes does not play this next week. Travis Kelce has had 27 yards, 45 yards, 68, 62 were pretty decent, 8 yards. He hasn't had a super, super good game since the Broncos game in week 10. He was still pretty good against the Raiders a few weeks ago, but not fantasy, not superb. So it's not like he's even been rock solid with Mahomes. If Mahomes is out, I don't trust Carson Wentz. I would probably consider at least streaming Strange over Kelsey. William E., I'm going to look at these waiver wire moves to at least block my opponent's needs. Big facts. Huge facts, everybody. If you don't need anybody, if your starting lineup's looking great, but your opponent just lost their tight end or lost their running back, and you could pick up some of these guys to block them from doing so, do that. It as long as it's legal in your league, which it should be. Don't know why it wouldn't be. It is a viable and important part of fantasy strategy. And whether or not they scream and cry and kick their feet, you have a strong foundation to stand on in making those moves. Sam Burks, lots of questions this week, it seems like. Thanks for taking time to go through them. Agree. Listen, it's the most important time of the year, and not just because Santa Claus is coming to town. No, not really. But it's the semifinals and the finals. There's still a lot of people left in the playoffs because they subscribe to 4 for 4 and listen to this podcast all year. Am I right? Ayinde Mitchell says, are you high on De'Ami Brown from Washington as the number 2 wide receiver? No, I am not. And I'm kind of curious why we're seeing De'Ami Brown mentioned twice in this podcast. He had 3 catches for 30 yards on 4 targets on Sunday. Did he do something before that I just completely missed? Nope. 4 catches on 5 targets for 35 yards, 2 catches on 2 guards. He hasn't done anything all year. Where is this De'Ami Brown excitement coming from? I have no interest in De'Ami Brown. I have more interest in Olamide Zaccheaus, to be honest. And I don't really have interest in him. So no, pass on De'Ami Brown. Michael Quinzel, great assessment on my chance to win question earlier. Sleeper says 52%, and you say 55%. Either way, we'll be close. Thanks, you're the man. Yes, I will say Sleeper tends to, I believe, err on the closeness side. So, particularly if there's multiple players still left. So, I believe I am correct here. Cody Watts. Ooh, this one is interesting. Excuse me, everybody. I think I have some allergies this morning. Brees has been disappointing. Might be a dumb question, but Jerome Ford or Brees? Oh boy. Let's look at the matchups. Jerome Ford gets the Bengals, runnable. Brees Hall gets the Rams, runnable. Oh gosh. So I will say I would consider Jerome Ford here, but in the end, I would probably say you want to start your studs. So if Brees Hall practices in a sufficient capacity to where we believe he is healthy heading into this week, I would probably still play Brees Hall. If he's questionable, misses practice, limited, then I would probably consider Jerome Ford a little more. But I just don't know if you could start Jerome Ford over Brees Hall in a semifinal matchup. The pain of watching Brees Hall finally do what he's supposed to and Jerome Ford getting like 5 carries because they use the other guys instead, which is possible but not probable, is hard to overcome. So that's what I would say there. Jermaine Robinson, do you trust Amari Cooper moving forward? And would you flex him over Tracy in a half PPR? Cooper clocked in to work at Dunkin' Donuts this past Sunday. Yeah, you cannot trust Amari Cooper at all when he got 0 targets. I will say the Cooper bust week, Cooper Kupp had a zero burger as well, but at least he had 3 targets, and we know he is the 1A, or sorry, 1B or 2 in this offense. Amari Cooper had 0 targets. I saw the vast majority of snaps I watched, he wasn't even on the field. In fact, let's pull that up real quick because it's kind of valuable information. Routes. He ran. I'm sorry. What? He ran 0 routes. Hello? Let me see if he had snaps. He had 30 snaps. This is impossible. This has to be an error. It is not an error. I am seeing that he had 30 snaps and ran 0 routes according to Next Gen Stats. I am going to send out a tweet. You know what? I'm going to do it right now live on the show. I am seeing that Amari Cooper had, okay, let me just triple check it one more time before I go putting us out in public. Offensive snaps, 30. What in the heck? I am seeing that Amari Cooper had 30 offensive snaps, but ran exactly 0 routes on Sunday. Somebody please double check me. Tweet or post if you want to go X route. All right. Thank you all for bearing with me for that live tweet. Jeez. Yeah, you cannot trust a guy who ran 0 routes. In fact, you can drop a guy who ran 0 routes. I will never put him in my fantasy lineup again this year. I don't care if he scores 40 fantasy points next week, which he won't do. Uh do. Okay, this question from Cody Watts, I'm not entirely sure what it means. Burrow / Brees, Chase Brown / Nico, Cup, JSN / Kelsey, am I toast? What the heck does that mean, Cody? Does that mean you have Burrow versus Brees? No, it does. I don't know what this means. Does this mean this is your team? Because if so, I'm confused why you wouldn't order them as by position. If it is your team, you're definitely not toast. That's a fine team. I'll look for a clarifying message from you, Cody, but I don't have any idea what this means. M. Loiza 98 says Ty Johnson thoughts worth a pickup? Yeah, they are. The Ty Johnson thoughts are in the waiver wire column. Yes, he is worth a pickup. You can read more by subscribing and checking out my column, which you should do. Eli the Reaper gives the RB1 now, torn MCL from Montgomery. He is going to be very close to the RB1 overall rest of season, yes. Saquon Barkley is in that mix. Is Bijan Robinson is in that mix, and I think that's probably it. Jahmyr Gibbs. Taking a quick glance at everybody else remaining, yeah, I think that's it. Josh Jacobs has been playing really well, and he fits this time of year, so he could be, but he doesn't have quite as much of the receiving upside. So, yeah, I think it's Barkley, Bijan, Gibbs at the top. Nihal Nijar. I have George Pickens on IR. Who do I play next week if he doesn't return? Tracy, Amari, Worthy, Odunze, Kendre, or I might be able to pick up Ford. Let me glance briefly at what Tyrone Tracy did this week because there's been a lot of mention of him these last few chats, and it's giving me the impression that he was bad. 10 carries for 31 yards. That is indeed bad. However, it was against the Ravens defense, who is very, very good against the run, and I believe I mentioned at some point that you should not play him against that defense if you could help it. He gets the Falcons next week, who aren't super easy, but they're not the Ravens. You're not playing Amari. I did include Xavier Worthy, I will admit, in the waiver wire column because he's finally starting to get a workload worth trusting rather than just the one big play a game. Odunze is super hit or miss for most of the season, so it's hard to trust him. Had 10 targets in consecutive games a few weeks ago, although he wasn't actually even that good for fantasy in either of them. Yeah, he's impossible to trust. Kendre, if Kamara is out, I would consider Kendre Miller as the lead option here, or Ford. Both, if Kamara is not out, it's definitely Ford. And then Worthy is worth considering over both those running backs. Let's look at the matchup real quick against the Texans. Yeah, I consider Worthy viable, especially if it's a half PPR, full PPR over Miller or Ford. Cody Watts says Gibbs is a league winner IMO. Yes, that is very much the case. No clarifying note. Oh, Cody Watts said, is that lineup able to win or is it likely done? Yeah, that lineup is able to win. Burrow, Brees, Chase Brown, Nico, Cup, JSN, Kelsey can absolutely win. Nihal Nijara. Wait, Amari didn't run a route? I knew he didn't get targets, but damn. Yes, that is what I am seeing according to Next Gen Stats. I have not yet received a confirmation from Next Gen Stats or anyone else, but that's what I'm seeing. Michael Quinzel asks, is Tyrone Tracy still the RB1 for the Giants and the Ravens game as a result of the very young matchup, assuming you meant bad matchup? Yes, I would assume that is the case. It's not like somebody vastly outworked him. Devin Singletary had 8 carries to Tyrone Tracy's 10. They had the exact same yards per carry. So I don't expect Devin Singletary to take the job. It's just a really bad matchup. Some comments about Amari Cooper. A lot of conversation in the chat. Is there another question here anywhere? Boo, 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 boo. Michael Quinzel says, good luck advancing on your playoffs, everyone. I agree. Good luck, everyone. That appears to be it. Oh, here we go. Jermaine Robinson. Saquon was a little gimpy this past weekend. Thoughts on Gainwell if Saquon were to miss? Gainwell is in the handcuff huddle section of my waiver wire column. I think he absolutely should be added, and he should be heavily considered for a start if Saquon were to miss. He is the next man up. He has been pretty good, or looks pretty good with his touches this year. And obviously, this offense is a big, big, big offense to play a running back in. And that appears to be it. We will close it out there. 55 minutes, big show. Thank you, everybody, for all your questions. That was a gazillion of them. Lots of good ones. Lots of interesting situations, both for next week and in the remaining Monday Night Football games. Oh, we have one more question from Nihal Nijar. Titans D versus Jags or Eagles D versus Dallas week 17? Give me the Eagles D versus Dallas, I believe, there. The matchup's a little better probably against Jacksonville, though both are fine. But I prefer the Eagles D over the Titans D. Or Colts D versus the Giants. Oh, boy. I might go that way instead. The Giants don't even know who their quarterback is. They might be playing some fourth stringer by then. Wait, they already played a fourth stringer. Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito. They went to Tim Boyle this past weekend. So, yeah, they could be on a fifth stringer next week or by week 17. All right. We will close it out there. Thank you again, everybody. Great, great show. Lots of good stuff. Check out the waiver wire column if you need a name that wasn't noted here, or if you want to know the rest of my priorities. Also, the drop list is in there if you are holding on to some guys who shouldn't be. William E., do you think teams will give limited snaps in week 17? No, they will do that in week 18, most likely, which is one of the nice things about not playing in week 18, which you shouldn't be doing. And Patrick P., man, we're getting some last-second questions. Juwan Johnson or Strange for the playoffs? Brenton Strange. I like Juwan Johnson as well, but he was not good last week, and Brenton Strange was, so I'm going to go with the recency bias. Okay, we're signing off. No more questions, even if one comes in. I'm heading into work, everybody. Adios. Thanks for being here. Great show. Good luck on the waiver wire. May your fab bids ring true, and good luck in the semifinals.